Thanks for downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine.
This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Noma Cork by Vinventions. Driven by a commitment to innovation, the new plant-based Noma Cork Green Line offers significant improvements in wine closure performance. Thanks to a rigorous oxygen ingress rate, you can decide which cork is best for your wine, whether it's for young and fresh wines or for those with ageing potential.
Antonio Capaldo worked in finance and management consultancy, what he calls the dark side, before returning to take over the family wine estate, Feudi di San Gregorio in Campania. Listen to us chat about the 3 local DOCGs, based on the historic Fiano, Greco and Aglianico grapes, region's volcanic soils, the influence of the Greeks, the Romans and the Church, and why time is his hidden shareholder. Hi, Antonio. How are you?
Hi, Tim. I'm fine. Thanks for having me. What about you?
Fantastic. Thank you. And where are you?
I'm actually in Rome today.
So not at the winery?
No, okay. No, today I'm not at the winery. We have an old office in Rome, but I was at the winery yesterday.
Fantastic. And what sort of season have you had so far, 2023?
It's a challenging season, to be honest, and we're increasingly facing challenging seasons. And it was very rainy in the spring, which was quite unusual. And now we are fighting against the peronospora and in general diseases. No, we are doing our best, but I think we have to get used to having no predictability in our growing seasons in the future.
Yeah. I think it's a big problem. We might talk a bit later about climate change. I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about your early life, because you were born in Rome, which is where you are today, where you live as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I was born in Rome. My father and my family, before my father, they are from Avellino, so the town where the winery is located, in not far from Naples. But he decided to study outside of his hometown, and so he moved to Turin, and then he moved back to Rome, where he settled. He became a professor of economics. And then I was born, actually met my mother, and then I was born in Rome indeed. And I grew up in Rome mostly of my young days.
And tell us a little bit about the creation of Feudi di San Gregorio, the winery, because you were, 9 when your father and uncle created it?
Yes, I was 9. The winery is 9 years old, younger than me. And the creation of Feudi di San Gregorio actually started from a tragedy. We had one of the most terrible earthquake in Italy in 1980 that devastated the whole region, and is still considered today as a, and not particularly good to say that, but is a benchmark for every earthquake that happens in Italy, because was really one of the worst. And the winery started with this idea of investing back, both from my father in particular and my uncle, investing back in their own town to create something meaningful, to create employment opportunities, to create visibility opportunities. And I think that this idea of Renaissance, of in a way trying to bring back the great things about our area, is something that was one of the reasons of the success of Feudi di San Gregorio.
So your uncle and your father were wine drinkers rather than winemakers. They were economists, right? And business people.
Yeah. They were both economists. They were more drinking than actually really having a specific knowledge in winemaking. I think this gave them a fresh mind in order to try also to create new opportunities from the labels to also the winemaking choices. They brought expertise from outside of our area, which didn't mean at all at any time we left our connection to the grounds and to our roots, but we try to interpret them in a contemporary way. Look at our labels, look at the winery. And I think this fresh mindset towards our history and our legacy is also very important to understand our history.
And you studied economics at university as well, didn't you? Like your father. And then you went into the world of international finance and management consultancy. You worked for McKinsey. You became a partner. And then as soon as you became a partner, you left, right? You went back to the winery. Had you always wanted to go back to the winery?
Yeah, I hoped you didn't mention my dark side, but actually it's been a significant part of my life. Now, I actually, because of my family background, I studied economics, then I worked first of all in M&A, investment banking, then I worked in management consulting. The idea was to do kind of a journey, to learn, have a good method, to learn and to travel the world, and then doing something for myself. And I had this incredible opportunity to have this winery that was family owned, that gave me the opportunity to do that. So that's why in 2009, when I became a partner, I could immediately consider that part of the journey finished and start a new life in the wine world, which I loved a lot as a drinker more than as a winemaker. But I could immediately start that life.
Within 20 days of leaving McKinsey, you were back in Campania, right?
Yeah, this was quite a shock. Leaving a place where I was traveling every day was in a different city, going back to something very different, but very challenging. I mean, the challenges are different, but honestly, the wine world proved to be quite challenging, similarly to a career in the international management consulting.
I mean, do you miss that life or not?
Not at all. Not at all. I don't miss the ties, even if they don't wear ties anymore anyway. They're like Friday in the office all week. So even this has changed, the dress code. But no, I don't miss that. I think I'm doing something very meaningful, or at least I try. And most importantly, I love what the wine, what is distinctive in wine. So the connection between the creation, the nature, and also the history and the traditions of the man. So I believe that wine is, I'm very lucky to work in this industry. Probably if I had to work in banking, it would not be the same. But I'm very, 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 very happy. And so I'm not missing it.
But the money's better in banking and management consultancy, isn't it?
Way better, way better. I mean, Philippine de Rothschild used to say, that wine business is good after the first 2 centuries. And I think she was right. It was the piece of the book that my father gave me in order to handle my impatience. And I think it's true. I think wine is not about the money at the beginning. But then the good thing about wine is that it tends to be quite resilient. And when I say that, of course, it's the connection to the land, but it's also that once you establish a brand in wine, it tends to grow rather than being very volatile. No? And I think this is a good thing about my sector, wine.
But it's very interesting, this comparison you made. I read an interview that you did saying that in finance, time is cost. In wine, it's value. Can you talk a little bit more about that, about the difference between those two types of time, as it were?
Yeah, I think it's a good quote, Tim. I think it's a good simplification of a broader concept. No, in finance, time is a deterministic factor. It's quite mechanical. You say, okay, every year I move this amount back and forth. This as a fixed cost that is captured by a rate, and it all looks very, very simple, quite mechanical, mathematical, I would say. In wine, I could experience a totally different story. I mean, nothing is proportional, linear. Some trends are really exponential. The expertise and the value that you can put through time in a bottle of wine or in a vine, it's something that makes this really precious. So time, in a way, is not something you need to fight against like you do in finance, because you are incurring in a cost if you wait too long. On the contrary, in wine, you need to be patient. You need to wait, and you're going to find out that your expertise can follow, even my personal one, can follow an exponential curve, similarly to the memory that the vine can keep of the different weather seasons that it experiences, similar to the quality of a great and fine wine over time.
And another one of your very good quotes, I keep quoting good quotes at you, is you said that time is a hidden shareholder. It's your hidden shareholder when you own a winery. Just extrapolate on that as well.
Yeah, I think it's good because, in particular, growing up in management consulting or in economics in general, you know that you have a platea, a set of stakeholders that you need to satisfy. Now, your employees, your banks, shareholders, creditors, and then there is time. And honestly, I never thought of time as an hidden shareholder or stakeholder, but actually, wine it is. You cannot be convinced that something is working unless you wait a little time, unless you're sure the time is also satisfied. If you release a wine too early, it may be a great success, but then it catches up. You're going to be unsuccessful in the end because the wine is not going to prove the quality that you attach to it. So you may sell at the beginning, but then you have a backfire. Similarly, time is important to manage the different season. Is important also in the way you handle your employees. You shouldn't expect people that you bring from the outside industry, which is something I love to do because I believe the contamination between wine and other realms is important. to make really the wine industry grow. You can't expect them to be 100% efficient after 3 days. They need time to learn. And so you need to give yourself time, which is at the end of the day, is also a psychological thing. If you don't give yourself time, then you tend to make a lot of mistakes, which I did. So when I say that, personally, I experienced that lesson that if you don't give yourself time, you tend to do bad choices. And as many, probably I gave bad advice when I was in management consulting, but surely I made bad decisions when I joined wine without having this idea of patience in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that your approach to wine has been that of a drinker, somebody who asks questions. You're obviously highly intelligent and you have this economic background as well, rather than a trained winemaker. Do you think that's helped you in a way, as being almost a bit of an outsider?
Yeah, first of all, I don't ask questions all the time when I'm drinking. Otherwise, I don't enjoy it. People don't want to drink with me anymore. But honestly, I think this is important. I mean, I didn't study winemaking, so I did not start it when I was already 32 or 33. I decided to continue my approach, which is having an open mind, which is similar to what my father and my uncle did before. Having an open mind, asking questions, understanding what also other regions are doing, other producers are doing, without all the technical infrastructure and also the technical expertise, which I don't have, but the technical infrastructure that sometimes prevents you to having an open approach to things. You know, we need to cherish and protect our heritage and tradition in wine because this is key, but also at the same time, we need to keep an open mind. And I think I'm lucky, and I'm also very lucky because I never thought that I have to drink my wines more than the others and that my wines are better than the others. I never think that. They're just different. Of course, we do also comparison. In particular, if you have a specific appellation and you want to compare with others, that's normal. But I never thought that the wine is better than the other, and that's the aim. The aim is to express its own diversity. Yeah. And it's not politically correct what I'm saying. It's really something that if you're a technician, I see my winemaker, my agronomist and my winemaker, they take a bottle, they sip, and then they start doing analysis. And I think this is crazy. I don't care about that. I care about the connection that this wine creates in me. And more importantly, if you can drink the wine together with other people, the convivial effect. There are wines that are really impressive when you drink them, but then you don't finish the glass. There are wines that are impressive, but you don't share these emotions with other people. This, for me, is not the idea of wine I have in mind. So by having this very philosophical approach to what my wines should be, this helps me not to get too technical. Then, of course, sometimes I'm a pain for the people that work with me because I say things that they don't understand what I'm referring to. But I try to, joyful wines, for me, it's a concept that I always, and it doesn't have anything to do with how much expensive they are, how much alcohol they get. Joyful and immediate wines is a concept that for me is key. And when I say I taste a wine that is not joyful, I say it doesn't bring me joy. And of course, the people look at me and they say, oh, what the hell is this saying? That's a bit my life.
No, well, I agree with you completely. Just tell us a little bit about where you are. I mean, not right now in Rome, but where the winery is. It's in the Irpinia sub-region of Campania, and that's the region that takes its name from the city of Naples. Just tell us a little bit about the climate, the influence of the ocean or the Mediterranean Sea, and also where you are, because it's not what people expect, is it?
No, actually, it's a little bit surprising. We are a surprising south, or a fake south, I would say. I always think of Irpinia. Irpinia is this small area in the center of Campania. So we have 40 kilometers inland from Naples, enclosed by mountains. I always think of this region where you can find the 3 DOCGs, Fiano, di Avellino, Greco di Tufo, and Taurasi. I always think of Irpinia as a continental island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. So basically, you have the coast that is famous. Now you have the Amalfi Coast, and you have Naples, then you have the islands of Capri and Ischia. There you have perfect weather for, taking a sun bath. You have good sun, very nice weather also in wintertime. When you move 30 kilometers inland, the situation changes. We have over 200 days of rain per year, 1,300 millimeters of rain, which is the double of Champagne or Bordeaux, highest in Italy. So it's surprising because the clouds tend to stay within the mountains that enclose the area. And the other thing that is peculiar, the elevation that I just mentioned. So all the vineyards we grow are above 400 meters, up to 800, 900 meters altitude. And the third thing is that we have a very a great diversity in soils. We have from volcanic soils or mineral soils of sea origin rather than volcanic origin. Then you have limestone, then you have chalk. You have many, many different soils, which is a great key to success, because as many variables you may get in growing your vines, that's going to be better in your winery when you bring back the wine and you try to understand, the potential of diversity that you can express. The diversity of Irpinia is enormous. And then last thing to mention is we have these incredible indigenous varietals. There are many in Campania. I think in Campania there are more than in all France. And in Irpinia in particular, we have three, Greco, Fiano, and Aglianico. That is the basis of the Taurasi DOCG. And the good thing is that they don't overlap. They never overlapped. It's not because the law said, the DOCG protocol said you don't plant Fiano or Greco. It's because the farmers associated a specific varietal to a specific portion of land with specific soils. So we have an idea of terroir ante litteram, I would say, that was always present in my area.
I mean, Campania has a long history of growing grapes, even though its wines latterly have not been that famous. They've changed really since you guys started in 1986. But just tell us a little bit about the Greek connection and the Roman connection and the connection with the church. I mean, how did the region develop as a wine growing area?
Yeah, we have to pay, when we talk about a story, we have to pay two great tributes. One is to the ancient Greek and Romans, and the second is to the church. Now, the first heritage, the Greek and Roman, they brought us our varietals. So historically, the Greek came down from Greece to Sicily up to Campania, and they brought their own varietals, mostly probably Greco, and also probably Aglianico, although there is some controversial debate about whether it came from the Greek or from other origin. Then there were the Romans. The area of Campania Felix was famous for the Romans because they were producing a lot of things from Campania, actually, back in time, olive oil, wine, and an average soldier of the Roman army could drink a liter of wine per day. Wow. Imagine the money that wine producers were making at the time. And then Fiano, Falanghina, another varietal of Campania, Biancolella, many other varietals of Campania emerged during the Roman time. And then we have the church, as you said. I mean, in all Italy, actually in all Europe, the varietals were brought by mostly the Romans, even up in France. But then the preservation of the wine culture was ensured by the monks, the abbeys, the church, basically, throughout the whole Middle Age. And in particular, in Irpinia, we have two wonderful abbeys that from the 11th century, they protected the native varietals, Greco, Fiano, Falanghina, Aglianico. And the reason why we are called Feudi di San Gregorio, actually, Feudi means ownership of estates, basically, of Gregory the Great, is that in the 7th century, there was this Pope, Gregorio Magno, and he was very famous because he reorganized the church, and under his pontificate, some of the, I don't want to say modern, but some of the less artisanal book of winemaking were already codified, and used to make wine in many areas of Italy, including my area. So we decided to call ourselves Feudi di San Gregorio to pay a tribute also to this second heritage. So yeah, it could be a little bit of a stereotype, these two big heritage looking backwards, but it's actually in Campania, they cross paths very nicely. The Greek, the Romans, and the history of the church.
And yet, when you guys started in 1986, the region didn't have a particularly good reputation as a wine-producing area. I think there were only 6 people bottling wine, weren't there?
Yeah, but grape production was important. It was important before the philosopher, actually. At the end of the 19th century, there was a lot of grape production in the area. And in particular, when the philosopher attacked, a lot of bulk wine and grapes were sold to northern producers up to Piedmont. There was even a railway bringing the bulk wine from my area to Piedmont. The issue is that then their industry failed to evolve from just grape production or bulk wine production to really being a serious, production of wine with brands, with appellation, with, promotion, etc. So when we started in 86, there were only 6 bottlers in the area. We were number 6, actually. And now there are 150. So we are catching up to our great history. Consider one thing, Tim, the first actually the second in Europe and the first in Italy, Institute of Winemaking and Viticulture, was actually created in Avellino in 1874. So there was an history of grape production, of viticulture. And we're catching up now in terms of winemaking, because now there are over 150 wineries. And I think it's very promising, because we could have a positive exchange about, viticulture, how to handle challenges in viticulture, how to handle challenges in aging wines, doing promotional projects together. I think there is no wine area that can just live on the shoulder of a single producer. I think having a community of producers of different sizes is key. Most of these producers came after us in terms of time, because they saw our example. Some of them, they came because they liked what we did. Some of them just because they didn't like what we did, and they wanted to show a different aspect of the region that they thought our winery was not in a way showing. And I think this is great, because in a way or another, Feudi di San Gregorio, they all say that the Feudi di San Gregorio growth in the 90s was important for their motivation and ambition to start producing wine. And that's why today we are in a vibrant area with many producers. And I think we have great pages to write in the next 20 years.
And you said you've got these 3 DOCGs, and DOCG is the highest level of Italian wine, at least in theory. Just tell us a little about the difference between the 3. Each is based on a grape variety, isn't it? So Fiano, Greco, and then Aglianico.
Yeah, each is based on a grape varietal, and each is based on a specific terroir. So you cannot plant Fiano where you plant Greco. There is only a very small overlap between Fiano and Aglianico, but very, very small. Now, the 3 DOCGs are relatively small in terms of hectares. Now, and we start with Fiano. Fiano is 550 hectares cultivated now, vineyards, similarly to Greco. Fiano is a varietal that comes from the Latin, differently from Greco. The name comes from the Latin word apianus, which meant that it was a grape varietal preferred by the bees because it's very sweet. And Fiano mostly grows on the hills, and the soils are limestone, but also some chalk you can find as well. There are areas that are a little bit different. We have different subzones with a little bit of different expressions, but overall, Fiano is a very rich, complex with a great structure of wine, both in the nose and in the mouth. It's quite rich, and also it's nice because it always tends to have almost a roasted almond finish, which is also the reason why we don't do any oak aging, nothing, because I think the complexity already comes from the varietal itself. Fiano is very resilient to diseases. I would say it's the dream varietal for every viticulturer. Greco is quite the opposite. I mean, similar in size, 500 hectares of 550 hectares of cultivated vineyards. Very, very delicate varietal, Greek origin, very delicate varietal, very soft skin. It grows on mostly on soils full with minerals. In particular, in the Tufo area, Greco di Tufo is because Tufo is the hometown, in the center of the appellation. Fiano di Avellino, similarly. Fiano is the varietal, Avellino is the name of the town. Now, in Tufo, there is one of the largest sulfurous mines of Italy. And the characteristics of Greco, this almost dark note, this complexity in the mouth that is much bigger than in the nose, sometimes the nose is pretty closed, is a very peculiar characteristics of Greco. It explains why, because of the soil composure, it doesn't retain water in the summer, so the vine has to suffer hard, reduces yield, reduces the size of the berry, the color gets more concentrated, and the wine tends to be more, it's kind of a fake red, more vertical than horizontal. So that's a big difference between Fiano and Greco. They both enjoy one thing, that is acidity, freshness is great amount. So they both have potential for longevity and aging, but they are very different in the sense that Fiano is there is an harmony between nose and mouth. I would say is a blockbuster white wine, while Greco is an outsider. Greco in particular in great vintages is something that you never tasted in your life. It's all in the mouth, super long. You can fight with Aglianico even in terms of power in the mouth. And I'm not meaning alcohol, I'm meaning length, aftertaste, mineral aftertaste that doesn't come from volcanic soil, but it comes from this minerality that is embedded because of the mines in the soil. The third is actually Taurasi DOCG. The name of the grape is Aglianico. Don't ask me why in this case they don't say Aglianico of Taurasi. They just say Taurasi, just because Italian wine is quite complex. To be honest, you need the 10 degrees to understand that. We make our life complicated, and we make complicated the life for the people that want to taste our wines. But Taurasi is the name of a town. The vines start actually from Taurasi up to the hills, from 450 meters where Taurasi town is located. The vines grow up to Castelfranci, Paternopoli, other towns that are at 800 meters. In Aglianico, to become a Taurasi, has to fill two things. Basically, first is that it needs to be an Aglianico in the appellation area. Secondly, it needs 3 years of aging, of which 1 year in oak. The tradition, oak, you can use whatever you want. The tradition is mostly large chestnut oak. Now, increasingly, wineries are applying large Slavonian oak rather than barriques, because Aglianico is rich, is a varietal, similarly to the other two. I said a lot of things, beautiful things about my varietals, not because I'm partisan, but because we are really rich in everything. So the man should disappear. You shouldn't show your muscles. You should use aging recipients that don't cover the fruit. And
they're neutral. They're neutral in a way, aren't they? The three of them.
Neutral as possible. So that's why on the whites we don't use any oak. We just use stainless steel. On the red, on the Aglianico, we mostly use large oak. It was not all the time like that, but now, luckily, we, in a way, we are living by our tradition, which is important. And we use large oak in order to preserve the power of Aglianico. Aglianico is a varietal that is powerful in everything, from alcohol to structure to tannins, but it's also capable color, but it's also capable of an incredible elegance, thanks to the minerality, freshness, balance that you can find, in particular if you harvest at the right time, because it's still the biggest challenge is that, because they're all late harvest varietals, and if you harvest where the temperature is below zero, sometimes you tend to harvest a little bit earlier than what it's really needed, no? And so the challenge is to be brave and courageous.
Because sometimes you'd be picking Aglianico, in November? Does that still happen?
Yeah, I mean, the last 4 vintages we ended at the end of October. But before, I remember we were going up to 6th or 7th of November. Now, of course, everything is a bit anticipated, as you know, but still, we don't harvest Fiano, Greco and Aglianico before October. Falanghina we harvest earlier, but the other three we harvest in October, and we close basically the harvest season in Italy together with Valtellina. So we are among the latest to pick up our grapes.
I mean, have you ever picked in the snow?
No, in the snow, no, but with the temperature below zero in the night, yes. And it's a challenge because you always risk that the berry, in a way, breaks down and you lose everything. So we cannot blame our farmers or even our workers when sometimes in the past, in particular, they were trying to anticipate that. And this is the challenge, because if you anticipate on a varietal such as Aglianico, you tend to have a green tannin. It doesn't forgive you, even if you wait 30 years. So you really need to be brave. And it's not really technology, it's the experience that is helping, and also the mindset. But climate change, in our case, is also helping a lot, surprisingly, because the harvest seasons are becoming much more regular. Of course, I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying just that for us, over the past 4 or 5 vintages, you taste wines that it's much easier to get to the maturity of the fruit of Aglianico because of the better conditions of the harvest season.
Because I think you once said that Aglianico is a great variety that doesn't give you a second chance. But maybe with climate change, it gives you a little bit more of a chance, does it? Yeah,
I mean, basically you can wait without having to risk to lose everything. You can wait because the season you have in October, you easily have now temperature of 15 to 20 degrees in the day. I remember even in 2009, it was below 10 degrees during the day. So, and it was raining, and then if it starts raining, then you don't get into the vineyard maybe for 10 days. So in 10 days' time, you don't know you're going to find out. So it's quite scary if I think also on myself over the past 15 years, how the climate changed so drastically. But I'm saying that the byproduct in areas like mine, late harvest, a lot of rain, very, very tough temperature in the fall, this makes your life easier. But of course, this cannot last. Otherwise, we're going to harvest in August, and people that are harvesting today in August, they're not going to harvest at all. So I'm just saying that the latest vintages have been more regular, in particular in October, which is key for us.
How many wines do you make in total? Because you've got these 3 DOCG wines, and you have a sort of super Taurasi as well, don't you? Called Serpico. Which other wines do you make? How many other wines?
Yeah, out of the 3 white varietals, so Greco, Fiano, and Falanghina, we do 2 whites of each, 2 wines of each. One is a single vineyard, and the second one is, the classic wine. So we make Falanghina, and the single vineyard is called Cerocielo. Then we do Greco di Tufo, and the single vineyard is called Cutizzi. And then we do Fiano di Avellino, and we do a single vineyard called Pietracalda. Then we have on the Aglianico, we have an Aglianico that is unoaked, that is called Rubrato. It's kind of an introduction to the Aglianico, where you can see what I'm saying is that people expect Aglianico to be massive, to be rustic. And actually, even without any oak, 1 year after the harvest, if you get the right maturation of the grape, the wine is super pleasant, super rich with a wonderful fruit. And then we go with the Taurasi, and then we have 2 Riserva single vineyard. One is called Taurasi Piano di Montevergine, and the second one is called Serpico. And Serpico is an Aglianico coming exclusively from Pre-Phylloxera vines that are over, let's say, almost 200 years old. Then we have a last wine that is called Patrimo, which is an intruder. Is a 90 years old Merlot vineyard that we produce as a single vineyard. Last thing is that we also have a collection of small single vineyard batches called Feudi Studi. We do 4 for each appellation every year. These are mostly educational. So every year we do 12 wines, 4 Greco, 4 Fiano, 4 Aglianicos, that we mostly keep at the winery, but they allow us to show the diversity of the different sub-terroirs. And I believe in the future we are going to have more single vineyards coming up, because something I didn't mention is that we have a very parcelled property. So even we have 300 hectares divided in 800 parcels. The potential for single vineyards is great, and it's meaningful because soils are different, exposures are different, history of the vines is different. So we have a potential to do more single vineyards. So this Feudi Studi project is a way of investigating this potential, and we're going to bring probably to the consumers some of these wines in the future.
I mean, you've mentioned these old vines. Campania has some of the oldest vines in the world, and you're a great advocate for the qualities of old vines. What can you do to preserve them and promote their unique attributes?
The first thing is don't tear them down because they're not productive. No? And actually, this was not granted. I mean, still today, there are in some areas of the world, they take them down because they're not particularly productive, because they belong to an old-fashioned viticulture that require a lot of labor and workforce. In particular, if you think about Serpico vineyard, these are pergola that are 3 meters tall. We need to harvest by ladders. Everything we need to do on the plant takes a lot of time. So first thing, don't tear them down. Second thing is actually try to understand the genetic power of those. So we did a 20 years old study. It helped us a lot to select several biotypes that we plant in all our new vineyards. And so you recreate a diversity in your new vineyards. So studying them and make them not just a kind of a celebrant or ambassador grape or whatever. No, they need to be at the center of your viticultural approach. You need to select the biotypes. You need to study that. And that's something we did. And then, of course, promoting the wines that come from them. We have the Serpico that is our top red. I think there is a lot of research that can be done on this because you know what's interesting is that both in terms of cultivation method and in terms of genetic biotypes, these prove to be way more resilient than the selected clones to any possible climate shock that we experienced over the past 10 years. And I'm not talking about the heat. I'm talking about the climate shock. So I'm talking about having crazy, like this year, crazy rain in the fall, or temperature that are too hot in the winter, or temperature that tend to be very, very hot in the summer. Even hailstorms, they tend to be more resilient to that. The plant tends to regenerate more easily. And also these are varietals these are cultivation methods such as the pergola. The pergola is not particularly efficient because either you use ladders, or even if it's a smaller pergola, it's not easy you cannot use any machine, and it's not easy to handle that. But the good thing about these old viticultural systems is that they tend to protect the grape much better to shocks, in particular when it's too hot, because the leaves tend to cover the grape, but also when it rains a lot during the harvest season, because the humidity doesn't come up from the ground easily to a grape that is at least 1 meter above the level of the ground. So there are many things that actually they can teach us. So stop considering them as something to stay in a museum of the winery and put them in the center of the stage, like honestly we do for the whole Aglianico production.
I mean, you also own wineries in other Italian regions, don't you? In Vulture, which is in Basilicata, Bolgheri in Tuscany, and Friuli. This is part of your Tenute Capaldo project, yeah? I just wondered, do you take a different approach in those regions in terms of what you do in the vineyards and in the cellar, or are you applying the same precepts, the same ideas?
Yeah, of course, the varieties are different. The approach is the same, which means separating as much as possible the different subplots, the different areas, the different soils. Try to keep them separate as much as possible, even if then you have to blend them in. And then we tend to hire people from the area. So you have local people and then external people. So basically we have our team of agronomists at the center that cover everything. But in every estate, we have local people that have a very detailed and in-depth knowledge of what they have been doing. So, but I think the most the approach that we like. I mean, I think that what's more distinctive is try separation of parameters, separation of variables, studying every subplots. This is something we apply everywhere.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, you've got a Michelin-starred restaurant in the winery at Feudi di San Gregorio called Marina, yeah? Marina? How do you pronounce it? Marina or Marina?
Marina.
I'm not sure. Marina. It looks at the accent the wrong way around. Are you a cook? I mean, is it something you'll enjoy? Do you like cooking?
Very basic, Tim. I'm sorry. No. The cooking is not really my thing. But I always said I want to learn more, but no. That's why we have a restaurant. No, I'm kidding. We had a restaurant before. But actually, the good thing about all the people that are going to visit us, and all our winery is open every day, and we are very happy to welcome people to show them around. I think it's actually, I'm not cooking for them. So they have other opportunities that are way better than my own cuisine.
And you have a very strong interest in art, don't you? I mean, not just in the winery, but in you personally. Do you like to paint, or are you a collector? What's the interest?
Yeah, I did this when I was younger, both music and painting. And I think on this I can talk more about cuisine. I think it's an incredibly vibrant connection between the world of wine and world of art. We spoke about time at the beginning of this conversation. I think there is something that connects wine and art a lot, is the concept of time. You need to live by your heritage, which is the past. You need to create something today, which is similar to what an artist creates a piece of art, and we create our wines. But we have to think about also the consumers, in our case, or the viewers of tomorrow, how they're going to interpret their art. So in a way, an artist performs a journey through time of its own art. And sometimes it takes a long time, similarly to what we discussed before, to get the right recognition for an artist. Now, modestly, because of course we're talking about the different story, but when we try to produce our wines, we have to have the same approach. So I think the connection between wine and art has a strong roots. One is, of course, we as a family, we like it, so it's great, it's quite natural. Secondly, it's good to vehiculate to the people that work in the winery, in particular the people that are in production, that there is this connection, that they should think of themselves not that they're doing wine for being sold, but they're doing pieces of art coming from the nature. Sometimes in wineries, in particular large wineries, like mine is not super large, but is, I would say, medium size, the commercial area tends to overcome the production. And that's totally, it's an enormous mistake. So the artistic program that we have at Feudi also helps reminding people that work in production that they are at the center of the stage, that they should think of themselves as artists. And then thirdly, it's an attraction. So we have these different artistic pieces inside the winery that are nice to see, that they have a strong connection. So they're not just put there as a collection, but they are strictly connected to the winery because every piece of art is site specific. And all the proceeds, we'd also do special edition bottles every time we invite an artist. And all the proceeds go to a foundation locally. So his art is also part of our community program. And we became Benefit Corporation, and then we became B Corp last year, with art at the center of this program.
Fantastic. Thank you. It's a great moment on which to finish this idea, this lovely connection between time and art and wine. I think it's one of the many fascinating things that's come out of this conversation. Antonio, thank you so much for spending 45 minutes chatting to us. And I hope to see you very soon, either down in Italy, in the south of Italy, in Campania, or in London.
Thank you very much, Tim. And thanks to all the people who are going to have the patience to listen to me. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't know about you, but I'm glad Antonio left McKinsey all those years ago. What great insights into one of Italy's most exciting areas. Next week on Cork Talk, my guest is Maxence Dulou of Oyun in the Chinese province of Yunnan. Join me then. Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website, timatkin.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @TimAtkin and on Instagram @TimAtkinMW. See you next week.